The first reading, Job, and our gospel reading of Mark today are very, very short readings, the both of them. But they're packed with quite a few lessons. And the main theme in them is God's plan for us, God's plan for salvation. And there are some really key instructions given to us in both of these readings that we need to consider. Our gospel today is the very beginning of Mark's gospel. In fact, we're still on chapter 1, and this is the third week we've heard from the Gospel of Mark. 3 weeks ago, John the Baptist is imprisoned, and we heard the words, "This is the time of fulfillment. The kingdom of God is at hand." In other words, this is the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And sure enough, last week, we heard where Jesus was in the synagogue, teaching with authority, beginning of his ministry. And in that teaching with authority, he was teaching with such authority that he was driving out demons just with his words. And today, he continues in those first days of his ministry, but he goes beyond preaching. In fact, according to Mark, Peter's mother-in-law would be the very first person to be healed by his touch, not just by his preaching. We also hear then today that other than Peter's mother-in-law, many others were healed from illnesses and from demons. And this is all part of God's plan. Jesus came for one reason, and one reason only. He came to heal us. But what needs to be understood is he didn't come to heal us physically. He came to heal us spiritually from that original sin. In fact, in that first reading from Job, and as you remember the story of Job, Job is blessed with everything. He has money, he has animals, he has everything he could possibly need. And Satan tells God, he only honors you because he has all these things. If he didn't have anything, he wouldn't honor you. And so that was the story of Job. Everything was taken away from him. But as we know in the story of Job, even though Job laments about the brokenness of humanity and about the state of the human being, Job realizes that over time, God will overturn the human condition. He recognizes that it's the original sin that broke us, and it's God that can save us and bring us hope and healing. Job understands this, just as Peter's mother-in-law did today. In fact, we see that the moment she is healed, she recognizes that there's something going on more than physical healing, and she immediately shows us how to be a true disciple and what true discipleship looks like by serving others. And certainly, some other lessons, we see Jesus going on the next day, again showing us what true discipleship looks like, going and serving and healing others. There's another lesson that Jesus shows us that next morning, and if you aren't watching carefully, you'll miss it. And that is Very early the next morning, after he spent a day of healing people, he goes off by himself to a quiet place to pray. Even Jesus needed time to recharge his spiritual batteries. But there's an interesting thing that happens that next morning when he's there praying. Peter and the rest of the disciples catch up with him, and they tell him, everyone is looking for you. In other words, back at my mother-in-law's house, there's a whole line of people that are looking for you. They want to be healed physically. And that really brings us to the key point in today's gospel reading. Why didn't Jesus go back to Peter's mother-in-law's house? Why did he opt then to move on to other villages? It's because Jesus recognized that the people left there standing in line waiting to be healed have missed the essence of his healing. The essence of his healing is our salvation. God's plan is that Jesus came for our spiritual conversion, for our conversion of heart. He didn't come for our physical healing, although that occasionally happens and regularly happens. But that's not the point of his coming. We need to recognize, just like Job, and understand that suffering comes to all of us, and brokenness exists. But we cannot fall into the trap that we need to stand in line at Peter's mother-in-law's house to be healed physically. That's not what he came for. First and foremost, Christ came to heal us spiritually. And so this next week, I just ask that you take a few moments to meditate and ask yourself simply two questions. Question number one: when was the last time I stood in line begging to be healed physically? Then comes the tough question. When was the last time I stood in line begging to be healed spiritually?